Okay, I want to revisit the gun thing. So first off, thank you. By the way, I fired a gun just before I start. I fired a gun. By the way, I fired a shotgun. I have fired a shotgun. About a year ago, I went clay pigeon shooting. Shit, this is just a shit fact, right? Before I get started, shit fact. This I went clay pigeon shooting, skeet shooting, I think you call it in the States, and I shot. This is the shit fact. First two birds took the bastards down, right? What a fucking start, which mirrored. I must have some kind of penchant for these kind of things because first time I went 10-pin bowling, first ball that I bowled, fucking strike. First ball, strike. The only problem with stuff like that is it's downhill all the way, isn't it? Anyway, that was just a shit fact. I wanted to thank people for the responses that I got. People took my video in good faith. Thank you. I got some fantastic written responses that must have took some considerable time to write out. Also got some awesome video responses. Vernaculis did a very nice response. There was a guy who did a half-hour response. Fuck, I watched the video. I've forgotten his name. I'll list it in the footnotes. Quite a number of responses. But probably by common consent, the best of those responses was Justicar's response. I'll list that below as well. Thank you for those responses. Furnished me with a lot of information and altered my position with regard to some issues, which I'll talk about, but a couple of questions first. First question, one question is just generally, something was on the news today, but the other question was this one for the anti-gun lobby. Let's see if I can phrase this right so that it's not, so that it makes sense. I understand that this isn't about getting rid of the Second Amendment or amending the Second Amendment. I get that, right? And that a lot of the dispute is over the wording and things to do with well-maintained militias and all like that, and people interpreting it in different ways, as they have a want to do. And in fact, as Justicar said in he made another video about another politician, and he said that it's a little bit like the two parties have got a darts board, right, and they're throwing their darts at the darts board. They'll be going all over the fucking place because Americans are shit at darts. Throwing the darts at the darts board and then deciding by doing so which parts of the Constitution the Republican Party will just ignore and which parts of the Constitution the Democrats will ignore. And it kind of made me smile, that, because isn't that the world over? It's the classic example that I've come across so much with regard to religion and the Bible, is that the bits that already tell you what you want to tell you, then you take those bits literally and you cling on to and say, well, look, it says here in black and white, you can't go against that. And those bits that say things that you don't really like very much, you go the far end of a fucking fart to dispute. And it seems that there must be a measure of this, surely, with regard to this gun dispute. That many on the pro-gun side believe their interpretation of the Second Amendment because it fits in with their views on guns. And those on the anti-gun side read the Second Amendment as they do because it fits in with their anti-gun position. I can't believe it isn't a case there, just the same as it is everywhere else around the world, regardless of what the issue is. But this is the question putting that to one side, for the anti-gun mob out there that are desperate. They see all these guns, think American society would be much better if we had much tougher regulations, right? If the only way that you could get those regulations was to do something which went against the Second Amendment, right? So you had a decision to make here. Which do you prioritise? Your position with regard to guns or your commitment to the Constitution? Where would you go with that? Would you say, for me, the gun issue is such a big issue that I'm prepared to turn a blind eye to what we're doing here with regard to the Constitution? Or would you say, it doesn't matter how many mass shootings there is and how much against guns I am, I think the Constitution is sacrosanct, it's too important, I'm not prepared to go there, I'm going to have to bite my lip on this one and just accept that perhaps in perpetuity, even if the majority of people in the United States would like to see this enacted, it's just hard shit, we're just going to have to stick with things as they are. That's a question for the anti-gun side. Question for everybody here. I saw on BBC News today and then had a look on the site. Obama has brought in this legislation or something that will require people at gun fairs and selling guns online to do certain checks with regard to gun buyers. Now, what it said is, tell me if this is true. It says that if you buy a gun in a shop, you already have to do these checks, right? You already have to have these checks done. And it says that if you buy a gun from a fair, they have to ask you whether you're mad or a felon. This is what it said. But what they'll have to do now is, rather than just asking you and you saying, oh no, I'm not mad and I haven't committed any crimes, they will have to actually perform some checks. Now, it seemed that some people were still up in arms about that and said, well, this is against our Second Amendment rights. What I didn't, maybe the BBC was misreporting this. If they already have to ask you these, if gun shops already have to do these things, how come that isn't against your Second Amendment rights? If they're already having to ask you if you're mad or a felon, then surely they're not doing anything more than they were already doing. It's just that they're actually doing it properly, whereas before they weren't doing it properly. And the last bit with regard to this, which I suppose is mainly for the anti-gun side, what I don't quite understand with regard to this, I understand you wanting to maintain people's rights to have a gun. Partly because you're pro-guns for various different reasons, and partly because of this Second Amendment. But what I don't understand is one of the arguments I've heard made several times, and this came up actually in a couple of comments that were left, was that, a gun's a dangerous weapon, but so is owning a car. And the reason that I didn't get that, and I got into a bit of a discussion with somebody with regard to this, you do have to, if you own a car, almost anywhere in the world, you have to pass a test to show that you're at least reasonably competent in using that car. You know, that you know how to operate the car in a safe manner. So it's at least safe to yourself as well as to everybody else. So even if there are no restrictions on the kinds of firearms that people have, what is the problem with just having some basic competency test to make sure that people know how to operate the firearms that they are legally carrying? So that's a question that sort of chimes in with that bit that I'd seen today. That's that you can stop you could stop fucking watching whenever you wanted. If you ever had any sense, you'd have stopped watching after about 5 fucking seconds. But I just wanted to say, because I said thank you for the responses that I'd had to my first video. The bit that I got, right, there was one bit that the pro-gun side, they made a very, very good case, and I got. And the bit that I didn't get. The bit that I got was with regard to the Constitution and the status of the Constitution. And I absolutely understand. I was a little bit flippant in that first video. I said that surely if there's some new legislation that comes in that says that you can't have these guns, and people are saying, well, you do that, you'll have to take them out of my cold dead hands, I'll fight you to the death. I suggested that that was somewhat undemocratic. Of course, in the United Kingdom, it would be undemocratic because we just make legislation, and our legislation just supersedes whatever legislation was already there. And I hadn't considered the fact, of course, that A, that isn't the case in the United States, but B, also that what was being asked for was not a change in the Second Amendment, but was just leaving the Second Amendment in place and making legislation that said that you can't have certain kinds of guns or place certain restrictions. And so I can understand that if you genuinely feel that what is being done is detracting from the Second Amendment, is in opposition to what it says, what rights you have guaranteed by the Second Amendment, then I can understand that position. I got that. I understood that strength of feeling. It was made very forcefully by some people, politely but forcefully, and I got that one. The bit that I didn't get, I still don't get this fucking tyranny thing. I still don't get this fear of tyranny. If you're no country has a greater commitment to democracy than the United States. It kind of seeps out of the pores of Americans, and yet it seems strange that at the same time you have this great fear of, Reds under the bed, or that some kind of totalitarian fascist dictator is going to come along and remove all your democratic rights all of a sudden. I can't see anything less likely than that to happen. I think I said to Justicar in a comment to him on his video, I see more likelihood of the zombie apocalypse. Now there's a better reason for keeping your guns than that happening in the United States. And I kind of see the same in our country. Even though we haven't got a constitution, we have certain mechanisms. I might talk about that. I'm going to do a video on the monarchy, so I might talk about those mechanisms there. I just didn't get that tyranny thing. I suppose that's part of the upbringing. If it's something that's talked about, it's not something that's talked about in the United Kingdom. So it's just, I suppose it's just something that we don't consider. Okay, well, thanks for watching this video. If you've watched this one all the way to the end, be interested in your thoughts on those two questions. The one for the anti-gun people, on where do your priorities lie if there is this, if you had to choose between the Constitution and the gun issue. And then this thing about this thing in the news today. What is the problem if people already have to make these checks in stores, and they already have to ask a question at fairs? If that is the case, that was how the BBC reported it. What's wrong with making them actually do a fucking check at a gun fair rather than just asking you and taking what you say on good faith? Okay, that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.